We're looking at the Polyptych altarpiece by Jan van Eyck and maybe his brother Hubert before Hubert passed. And we're looking at it closed. And what we see are three sections, and I'm going to call these themes. The upper theme are the prophets from the Old Testament. Now, if I zoom in on here, yeah, look at, we see these figures and they have these scrolls unfurling around them. We can easily identify them as prophets because these scrolls are their prophecies. And these prophets are framed here looking down at the rest of the altarpiece because these prophets were identified as seeing visions of the Messiah, of the coming of the Son of God. And to place them within the altarpiece is not only a very common and traditional form of imagery in Christian altarpieces, but also notice how Jan van Eyck has placed them in an area where they look down as if they are seeing their vision before them. And then the vision is right behind them on the prophetic scroll. Lovely, right? The second panel, or theme, is the Annunciation. Now, the Annunciation is a moment in the life of Christ when the Virgin Mary receives a message from the Archangel Gabriel. Gabriel comes down and he announces that she will be pregnant with the Son of God. And here we see the sacred words of Gabriel being spoken and Mary's acknowledgement. And this posture she's in is one of humility and piety. Now, the language that is being written here is Latin, the language of the ancient Romans. And in Europe, during the Renaissance, to read and to speak and to write Latin was the language of scholars. And so here, we see the language of the highly educated, those who can read and write Latin. Another really interesting element is the fact that Mary's reply is written upside down and backwards. Why do you think that is? Because she is looking up, and the idea is that God is looking down and he would be able to hear or read her response. Wow, right? There are a lot of smaller elements within this panel that I would love to talk to you about, but because of time, we have to move forward. There's a lot of scholarship about the Ghent altarpiece, and if you have an interest in it, I am more than happy to share that with you. What I want us to notice about the Annunciation panel is the chiaroscuro, the attention to linear perspective. Now, Jan van Eyck has not quite perfected the linear perspective that we saw in Brunelleschi's linear perspective with the horizon, the vanishing point. But what we see here is a relative sense of perspective. We're seeing the idea of those orthogonals going to a specific point. So think of this again, in the Renaissance, many artists, many designers, many mathematicians and physicists are all trying to figure out how to put this three-dimensional world on a two-dimensional surface, like what we see here in the Annunciation. We see the beautiful attention to highlights, midtones, and shadows. Look at that gorgeous shadow that Gabriel is casting as he's presented here. And then let's move to our third and final panel, or theme. Now, I haven't given it a name or titled it, identified it like I did the other two themes, but what we're seeing here in this bottom panel are the portraits, are the two people who paid for this massive altarpiece. They're a married couple. You see the man in the woman, they're kneeling in prayer facing these two stone carved sculptures. The man is Eutychus and his wife Isabel. Now, Eutychus at the time was the mayor of Ghent, and he was an influential figure in the Duchy of Burgundy because he was a councilman to the Duke of Burgundy. And in Ghent, which he is the mayor of, he paid for this beautiful altarpiece as a way to enrich the city, enrich the citizens. This goes back again to humanism. The success and the power of Eutychus is then manifested in his his responsibility, his civic duties to his fellow man is then presented in the form of this beautiful artwork that is put on display for the public in St. Bavo's Cathedral. So we're seeing the Duchy of Burgundy, lots of money, lots of power, lots of influence, lots of art, but also that idea of bringing it back to the people, that this is an altarpiece not for their home, but for the larger benefit of the city of Ghent. So we're seeing humanism here. This was such a successful artwork, by the way, that after the presentation to the public, he was promoted to chief magistrate in the region. So yeah, art is power, art creates power. This is the detail to show you the two saints. The left is John the Baptist and the right is John the Evangelist. And I show these to you to give you a sense of skill for Jan van Eyck. Check it out. These are paintings, but they are so convincing as stonework. Jan van Eyck is praised for his skill and his ability to create these minute, delicate details and modulations of light and shadow. And this goes back to the development of oil paint. He would not be able to do this in tempera paints. And back to the idea of a painting that looks like sculpture or architecture. We've talked about that before with Giotto. Yeah, this is a way to show off, to be a painter and show sculpture in your painting and architecture in your painting, and it looks legit. That's a way that Jan van Eyck is totally showing off his skill sets. And I'm not going to knock it because he is extremely talented. Look at the way he's got this shadow, as if this is a real corner and the actual figure of Eutychus is sitting, kneeling in this architectural framework as he's looking at a real sculpture of John the Baptist. It's insane. It's so beautiful. This is just the outside of the altarpiece. We are going to be blown away by the inside. Here, to give you a sense of scale, we're looking at it open, and this is about 6 feet tall, this panel. So the figures above, in the above register, they are over life size. They are over 6 feet tall. If they were to stand up, they would bust through. They'd be over 6 feet tall. We're going to look at these two levels, and we're going to start at the top. Here we go. So on the top level, I framed out the two themes or visual thematic connections. The blue are Adam and Eve, and then the yellow frame is identifying Jesus enthroned with the Virgin Mary, John the Baptist, surrounded by angels. Now the two figures on the sides, Adam and Eve, within the Christian Bible are identified as the beginning of humanity, the first man and the first woman. And they are often paired on the sides of images of Christ because they are also, Adam and Eve, identified as original sin, as the casting of humans out of the Garden of Eden, paradise, and Jesus is seen as the salvation of humanity. So it's not unusual to have a pairing of Adam and Eve, naked and humble and vulnerable, and then to complete the story with the salvation of Jesus and the image of Jesus. The Jesus enthroned, well, enthroned means sitting on a throne. So we see this beautiful, massive throne. Let me just zoom in. Here we go. We see this gorgeous throne, and then we see his mother, Mary, and John the Baptist also enthroned, and they're surrounded with these angels who are all playing different instruments. What we're supposed to be understanding this image to be is a glimpse at heaven. We see the angels and God enthroned, Jesus as God enthroned. The inscriptions above their thrones speak to their majesty and their purity. And then we have these beautiful angels who are playing music, not only for Jesus and Mary and John the Baptist, but for us. Because think about the setting. This is placed in a church that would have had a choir, it would have had music playing, and standing beneath this altarpiece. And remember, anytime in art you see a mouth open or a musical instrument being strummed, you're supposed to put in the sound. We are supposed to hear these angels as they play these instruments and their mouths are open. I'm going to give you a better detail of this. This is really grainy. But we're supposed to hear the angels. And so you're standing in this church and you do hear music in the church. It's as if you've not only got this visual glimpse, but you are hearing that choir of angels in this space. It almost is there to transport you to a spiritual realm. Wow. We're going to get into more details of Jan van Eyck's figures, but let's look at the lower register. The bottom theme is the adoration of the mystic lamb. Now, the adoration of the mystic lamb is another very common subject matter seen in a lot of altarpieces and Christian imagery. What we have is this unified landscape among the panels. So there's 5 panels, but notice how each panel connects to the next. So unified landscape. All right. And then in the center of the landscape, we see an altar with the Lamb of Christ, the sacrificial lamb. And we have these beautiful angels. And on either side, coming in from the side panels into this central scene, are followers of Christ. We have saints, we have pilgrims, people who go on holy pilgrimage are called pilgrims. We have clergy members, we have crusading knights, and they are all gathering at the Lamb of God for the end of times that is described in the book of Revelation within the Christian Bible. So we're seeing yet another vision of something that hasn't happened, but has been outlined in the Bible. The attention to detail is something extremely remarkable in Jan van Eyck's work, and what he is most commonly praised for. Check this out. This is a high-resolution detail of the brooch that Jesus wears. We are able to recognize not only the types of jewelry, but the settings of rubies and emeralds and sapphires and pearls. And look at that luminous effect, how the light is able to almost be tangible on these hot spots of warm pearls. Oh, look at the texture of the gold brocade ribbon, and then the tassels and those frayed thin gold filaments, those threads. Oh my goodness gracious. Here, just to be blown away some more details. And this is a testament to the skill of Jan van Eyck and the application of oil paint. Look at how not only do we get that gold brocade and the amazing jewelry for Mary, but it is so intensely detailed that we can even read, we can easily identify the page in this prayer book that Mary is reading. We can read the text on her page. Here, these are John the Baptist's feet. So under this beautiful green robe that's lined in pearls and rubies and sapphires, you see this kind of shagginess right there? That's his hair shirt. He was easily identified as wearing, he was known for wearing this really rough, coarse hair tunic. And in this image, we see it. There's the rough hair shirt. I know this is the pixelated version, but then it even peeks out under the hem of his glorious robes. Wow, wow, wow. And then look at these lovely angels. Oh my goodness! Are you kidding me? Look at the expressions on their face. They are in the middle of singing, and you can see them scrunching up their faces, trying to hit these high notes. Their mouths are open. You can see their teeth, their tongues, their eyelashes, their eyebrows. The intensity of detail is not only a testament to Jan van Eyck, but it's meant to add to this moment of, I am here in San Pablo's Cathedral. I hear music. I see angels singing. Because remember, you would not be able to get this close to the altar. You would not be able to get this close to pieces that were 10, 12 feet above you. Instead, this is for the benefit of creating an illusion that is realistic and also speaks to the talent and skill of the artist and therefore the power and influence of the man who paid for this artwork. Yep, the mayor of Ghent, Jodocus. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. The details aren't just in that top panel. I mean, they're all over the place. This is just one more. The details of, or I should say, the attention to detail that Jan van Eyck puts into all of his work, we can identify the types of plants that are here in this larger landscape. He's not just saying like, oh, here's a bush, here's some leaves. No, he is very specific to the species of plant. And we can go through this painting and say, oh, this is from there, that's a this, that's a that, that's a hybrid of that. The amount of hyper detail that we see in Jan van Eyck's work is characteristic of Northern Renaissance. What? Wait, Miss Cortez, why did you highlight yourself? Where's the artwork? Okay, we talked about characteristics. Linear perspective, not quite there yet, but an attempt at it. We see chiaroscuro. We have attention to detail that we see in Italian Renaissance, but this hyper detail is something more characteristic of Northern Renaissance. So I want you to put that on your notes on the side. If we're making a comparison, hyper detail is a trademark of Northern Renaissance. Another trademark of Northern Renaissance are these intense expressions. It's not to say that the art that we saw in the Renaissance in Italy didn't have expression. But this kind of scrunched or, intensity of detail, intensity of emotion, this range of emotion is more characteristic, more often seen in artworks produced in Northern Europe. So trademarks of Northern European Renaissance, more often you're going to see hyper detail and more intense expression. Got it? And then all the other characteristics of the Renaissance that we discussed in the Italian Renaissance apply here as well. It's just amazing. It's so fantastic. Oh, one I didn't talk about, atmospheric perspective. Yeah, We got atmospheric perspective going on. So that's our other characteristic of the Renaissance, right? Atmospheric perspective. Da, 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 da. Now, this artwork is still in its original location. Let me show you St. Bavo Cathedral. Here it is. St. Bavo Cathedral, it's still in its original location, but it has had a life. This altarpiece, because art is such a powerful element, or I should say, art can be used to manipulate or to exert power. The Ghent altarpiece has gone through quite a list of dramatic events, including burglary, where it's been panels have been removed and recovered. In both world wars, it was used as a tool of manipulation to exert power. Specifically, I'm thinking during World War II, when the Nazis invaded Ghent, they took the altarpiece, disassembled it, and hid it in a salt mine in Germany. And it wasn't until after the war that it was recovered. However, when it was recovered, the panels of Adam and Eve, let me show you. Here, this is the recovery of the altarpiece, and you can see some of the panels back there. Unfortunately, during its transportation and its subsequent being hidden, the panels of Adam and Eve were heavily damaged, and so what we have today are replicas of those two artworks, and that's why the off color is there to recognize that these are not the originals, but they are placeholders. And then it's put behind bulletproof glass to further prevent people from destroying or taking the artwork. There is a massive movement to digitize, high resolution digitize masterpieces such as the Ghent altarpiece, and I'm going to include below a link to the digitized version of the Ghent altarpiece, and it is mind-blowing how close you can get, like zoom into this piece, and to really appreciate Jan van Eyck's skill as a painter, you need to play around and zoom in and zoom out on these panels. Okay, go check it out.